The most important piece of the YLS is that you get trained for consistency's sake. There are people who administer a YLS who've never been trained to do the YLS. And that's not a great thing, just because there are specific nuances when scoring it that you have to really be trained up on in order to score it accurately. If you have somebody who's scoring it after being trained, well, maybe they're scoring somebody at a 16, but somebody else who's not been trained scores it out as an 8. Well, that's a lot different, like in the probation world, as to supervision model. Because, you know, we have kids we supervise at a lower rate, we're more passive or reactive. We have kids that are on a higher level of supervision that we have to be very engaged with. Well, if there's that discrepancy between scores, then we're not going to adequately supervise them. So just make sure that if you're using it, you've been trained, because there's definitely a process involved in the entire YLS. You have some YLS handouts in addition to the PowerPoint. You actually have this form that we use. It's the YLS Trainee Interview Guide. They recommend that you do this until you become familiar with the questions. But we have PDI officers who have, I've got one in particular who's been a PDI officer for 11 years who uses this interview guide every time. But it goes through each domain of the YLS, and then it lists questions that you can ask. There's questions for the child, and then there's questions for the parent. So the process goes for us, again, we do the NYS, so we get an idea of what we're looking at here. If they score high enough, we're doing this YLS interview. We automatically switch gears and we go into the YLS. We do the interview separately because we want to get honest information, or at least as honest as we possibly can. Sometimes kids won't disclose information in front of their parents, either because they want to cover up what they're doing, or because, you know, they don't want to tell on their parent, or there's something going on in the household. Sometimes parents don't want to talk about what's going on in the house in front of their kids. Maybe they're scared that when they get home, Johnny's going to retaliate and start punching holes in the wall. We don't share with the parent or the child what one another said. It's kind of like left in confidence. It all goes into a report, but in Douglas County, the only people that receives our reports are the judge, the county attorney, and the child's attorney. Now, if the family and the child want a copy of the report, the judge has to be the one to order it. So we put everything in there. We don't hold back. Every bit of information that is disclosed to us through this YLS interview is included in our report. You also have this interview guide. In addition to the interview component, or excuse me, it's the scoring key. We use this to ask all the questions. And then we also have this YLS scoring key that we use when we're going through the information and we're scoring it out. So I believe they have that in there. Okay. I'm not going to train you on the YLS. That would take 2 days. So that's just to give you an idea of how we do it. Now, some of you are talking about time being an issue. When we schedule an appointment, from the time that they come in until the time they leave, we're blocking out about 2 hours of time. The YLS interview that we do takes about 45 minutes to an hour with each, the parent and then the child. Just because there are so many questions and so much information we can gather through using this YLS interview. Now, on top of that, we also gather collateral information. We gather a lot of it. We don't score that YLS until we are ready to dictate our report, because we want the most up-to-date information we possibly can have. So with that being said, we will go through the YLS information. There will be some interactive exercises. I don't know how you guys love that. At least we're not role-playing. That's all I got to say. I hate that. All right. Risk. What is risk? When I say, you know, Johnny is at risk, what would that mean to you? I know there's information up here, but risk. What is a risk? Okay, risk to reoffend. What would be something you would identify as being a risk? Okay, his peers. Okay, what other risks would... Substance? Any others? Okay, truancy, school. Supervision. Okay, leisure time. Did you say one? School. All right, so these are all risk components, right? So we look at risk of recidivism, which means to reoffend. High risk is likely or has a greater chance to recidivate. Low risk is not as likely. But when we do the YLS and we're trying to gauge these risk levels, what we're doing is we're putting them into proper classification so we know exactly what intervention services that youth needs. Now, we have a kid who's identified as being low risk. Are we going to apply the same standards or the same treatment options as somebody who's identified as high risk? Why don't we want to do that? Exactly. Statistically, it is shown that if you over-supervise a juvenile, the impact can have the opposite effect. They can recidivate at a higher rate, which seems strange. You know, you think that if they're under your thumb, we're going to stop them while they're young, and that way they'll never want to do it again. Well, it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If somebody tells you you're bad enough, well, what happens? You start believing that you're bad, and fine, if I'm going to be bad, then I might as well be really bad. All right. Best practices in risk assessment. Best predictor of criminal behavior are known. Certain factors need to be measured to develop an accurate and complete understanding of that risk. What's the best predictor of criminal behavior? Past behavior. Yes. Instruments that include both static and dynamic factors are the most accurate. What are static and dynamic factors? What's a static factor? You don't need to define it, but does somebody know one static factor?
Something you can't change.
Right, it's something you can't change. So give me one factor in a child's life you can't change.
Age.
Their age, their family.
Prior offenses.
What was that? Prior offenses. Okay, then what's a dynamic factor?
Friends.
Okay, they're friends. Friends can change, right? Okay. The best method is to use an actuarial approach. Basically, these are, and I'm giving you the nice definition here, these are factors related to outcomes, and it tallies a score based on the likelihood of that assessment. So you're giving all of that information, and as a result, it's giving you a score back saying, okay, this is their likelihood to recidivate. Multiple measures and risks need domain. We measure the risk factors in a multiple of ways by asking a variety of questions in order to gather the information that we need. We already talked about this, the static and the risk factors. The static factors are related to risk. They don't change. Dynamic factors can change. And the dynamic factors is what we're really honing in on, because what we're trying to do is help Johnny, quit skipping school, or help him with the substance abuse program. So we're trying to target those dynamic risk factors to lower the risk to recidivate. The dynamic risk factors and their importance are also identified as criminogenic needs. The needs are the what. Okay, what do we need to do to help Johnny? Risk is who. The need is the what. Changing these factors changes the probability of recidivism. So if we accurately identify the what and we apply our treatment options, and treatment could be classes, it could be counseling, whatever you want to identify as treatment, it lessens the likely probability of recidivism. It provides the basis for developing our case plans, and we're addressing those factors that will reduce risk. We're honing in on the 2 to 3 high-risk domains, and that's what we're developing our case plans off of. And the bottom line is it leads to public safety. This is what our overall goal is we want to make sure that Johnny grows up to be a good citizen, and our community is safe as a result. Okay, so the risk is the who, the high versus low client. The need is the targeted interventions, the what. The responsivity, does anybody know what the responsivity would be? For those of you who've done YLS, do you guys know?
As far as the intervention?
It could be, well, treatment components or what your case plan consists of. And again, it could be like a drug and alcohol education class, a truancy abatement program, it could be IOP. What would be a responsivity? Their responsiveness to the treatment. You can also look at responsivity as a barrier. What could prohibit Johnny from successfully completing this component of his case plan or his treatment? Well, maybe they don't have a car. Well, how does Johnny get to treatment if mom and dad don't have a car? You know, does he have access to a bus line? Or maybe they can't afford treatment. Well, then what? So you're also looking at what barriers exist that would prohibit success. Now, the professional discretion is kind of thrown in there. These screening instruments and these assessment tools, they're supposed to take out that bias. So we're being completely objective. We are coming up with our risk needs and our case plans based off these tools. But, you know, we all have education. We're smart. We've seen things. There is that small component of professional discretion. You know, that little bit of gut feeling. Well, gosh, you know, I know this family. And Johnny may be scoring out at an 8, but really I think he needs a higher level of supervision. Well, at that point, if you can really justify it, you can actually override to a different classification level. And again, like with the NYS and the YLS, you don't have to be a master's level, you don't have to be a PhD, you don't have to be an LMHP. As long as you're trained on these screening tools, then you know how to do them, because we're not diagnosing anybody. So I just wanted to throw that back out there. All right, so the risk principle. Most intensive treatment should be reserved for higher risk offenders. We must survey important risk factors to produce an accurate measurement of risk. We want to assess those static and those the static and dynamic factors. Okay, that's what we're looking at. Key elements of the YLS. It collects 42 pieces of information. The items are scored in a 0 to 1 format. The items are added together to produce an overall score. And that score is what's going to give you your classification. It's going to help you drive your case plan. The items are grouped into 8 subcomponents. All but one of the subcomponents contain dynamic items. There's a professional override section at the very back. We'll go into the one component that contains that factor. Okay, so these are the subcomponents of the YLS. The first component is that criminal history. Would that be a static or a dynamic factor? Exactly, it's static, because you can't change somebody's criminal history. Even if it's expunged, it still exists. You have 6 pieces of the family circumstances and parenting, 7 components to the education and employment, 4 to peer relations, 5 to substance abuse, 3 to leisure rec, 7 personality and behavior, and 5 components that focus in on the attitudes and the orientation. So it's a lot of information that you're gathering. It's a lot of questions that you're having to ask to get this information. There are different subcomponents of the YLS. The subcomponent 1 is the big piece of the YLS. It's all the questions that you're asking. It's all of the actual scoring that you're doing. But there are other components to the YLS. You have a part 2, which is the summary of the risks and the needs, and it is your total score that is calculated and the overall risk level that's determined. Typically in probation, what we're looking at, anything 15 or below is considered our low to low moderate risk. It's that reactive style of supervising. Anything 16 or above, we're actively supervising, developing case plans based off these real high risk domains. So there's a difference, and there's a reason why we do this YLS. The subcomponent 3 These are problems pertaining to family and parents. There's like a checklist of items like marital conflict or financial problems that you can go through and score. It's not implemented, or it's not, it doesn't impact the YLS score that's going to drive your case plans, but it also gives you an idea of these other risk factors that you're dealing with. There are 11 items when it comes to family and parents. There are 28 items that the youth is scored on, but again, not the actual YLS score. And it can be anything to low achievement, arson history, mental health history. It could be cultural differences. So there's all of these components that you're looking at in regards to these risks that aren't necessarily incorporated into your YLS score. But it continues to paint that big picture for you. Subcomponent 4, your assessment of the juvenile's general risk need level. And this is where your professional discretion comes in after you're looking at all the information. Let's say you get this YLS score, but then you're looking at all these other components, the subcomponent 3. You're like, wow, there's a lot going on in the home, and ooh, Johnny's really struggling in a lot of areas that aren't criminogenic in nature. Well, that's where you might take, your gut feeling and implement it into your YLS. So how do you gather all the information when you're doing a YLS? For you that do. How do you go about getting all the information that you need for the YLS? What was that? Through the interview. How else? Okay, you have to get collateral information. Who would you get collateral information from? You said schools. Is there anybody else? Therapists? Coaches? Exactly, probation officers, if they've been on prior community service or community supervision, absolutely. What I like to tell my unit is anybody that has had some sort of impact on that child's life, maybe it's grandma, maybe they live with their sister. Well, we need to talk to the parent, but we also need to talk to the sister who that child's been living with. They've been in therapy. Well, we need to get information from the therapist. We need to get information from the school. Well, let's say they've been involved with a mentor. Well, we probably need to talk to the mentor as well. There is never a time where you could get too much information. I know sometimes it seems like, wow, I've got a huge stack of information. I don't know what the court's going to want, or the court isn't going to want all this, or whomever you're responsible to report to, or the county attorney. But you'd rather have more than not enough. So you do the interview with the offender. You also do an interview with the parents. You're looking at their criminal history, their school records, if they've been placed out of the home, their institutional records, their discharge summaries, interviews with other professionals who've had any kind of contact. They've had psychological evaluations. You're taking that into account and including that information. Behavioral rating checklist from clinicians. So there's a lot of components to the YLS that aren't necessarily just the questions. And it's very important that you gather all of that information.
When it comes to
You're fine.
questions from professional counselors, we have a release giving us permission, but it takes a long time because they have their own release that must be signed by parent. And so sometimes that takes a very long time. Can't we all come up with one release that everybody can complete?
Well, in our office, we have a consent form that when they come into the office, the parent and the child automatically sign no matter what. Even if they're not in treatment, I tell them to have it signed because, the majority of our kids come out of court ordered to complete treatment of some sort, whether it be therapy or substance abuse, outpatient counseling. So we have them sign it. We also let the parents know, hey, if he's been in any type of service, will you please go and sign a release so we can get that information. A lot of times, as long as we have a release and we're sending it over to them and we're giving them a letter saying, hey, we need this information as soon as possible because we're completing an investigation. We have providers that will give us the information. Now we have other providers that are very big that don't see the immediate need to assist us. We might eventually get it, But, I always tell them, hey, we tried, we put that information in our report to the court. We attempted to obtain collateral information from Allegiant Health, and as to the writing of this report, we have not received any information. But we're making a note in the report that Johnny was seen by, Dr. Smith for outpatient counseling. Mom reported that he was seeing him for, depression. So that's all you can do. You can make the attempt, and if you don't get them, I would just make a notation of that. Yeah, some are definitely better than others. Okay, so major risk factors, we kind of threw some out. But you're looking for these antisocial attitudes, not antisocial personality, because again, we don't diagnose people. These attitudes, do they hang out with antisocial peers? Do they have an antisocial disposition about them? History of their antisocial behavior. So the prior history. What does their family look like? Their education, their employment. Are they going to school? Why are they in, before you, is it for truancy? And their substance abuse, which I don't know how many kids you guys work with, but it seems like 99.9% of each kid that comes to our door has at least smoked weed, drank. I'm always surprised when I read a report now and it doesn't say that somebody has smoked marijuana or had alcohol. I'm just like, what? You're almost like, what's wrong with this kid? That's sad. That is really sad. So sad. And then you're like, well, why are they even going through the system if they haven't used anything? Okay, so why are there risk factors? Why do you guys think that we have risk factors on the YLS? This is a very easy question. Right, so we know what we need to target. Okay. Antisocial attitudes, values, and beliefs. What we think and believe is related to how we act, correct? If you like water skiing, you go water skiing. Do you like it? Yeah. It also justifies, it neutralizes, and it rationalizes our behavior. There are some kids who have that criminal mindset, and they can justify their bad behavior. They blame the victim. Oh, well, she shouldn't have been dressing like that. Or he shouldn't have left his car unlocked. They deny harm or deny that there was even a victim. Some kids are like, well, that's Target. They're not going to miss that $50 game. They're so big, it doesn't matter. They also appeal to a higher loyalty, or they have an allegiance to a higher loyalty. Does anybody have an idea of what that means? What was that? Gang involvement. That's their family. The gang is telling them to do it, so they're going to do it. So there's different ways that they can back up their criminal mindset. The antisocial peers, who we hang around, impacts what we do. The peers influence our attitudes, our values, and beliefs. And like I said before, peers at this point in time are incredibly important to juveniles, right? You remember how your whole world revolves around your friends? Well, your whole world is negative friends. Are you going to be that one kid in the group that says, you know what, I'm not going to do what you do? Well, if that's how you think, then you're probably not with those bad friends anyway. The peers influence their attitudes, their values, their beliefs. They can change everything of what they like, what they believe in. They reward their bad behavior. Hey, great job knocking that kid out at school today. You're really tough. Okay, well, when you're getting that positive reinforcement, what are you going to do? Do it again. Oh gosh, I got so much attention. I am tough. I'm going to punch out the next kid that gives me a hard time. They can also punish behavior. How would they punish behavior? They could exclude you. So if you're doing something they don't like, or maybe you are walking away from a fight when they encourage you to do so, they can exclude you from the group. They can give you a hard time, push you into doing whatever it is that they want you to do. Antisocial personality, again, it's a personality. These are personality traits. We're not diagnosing them as being antisocial. This is, though, they have weak socialization. They don't have a lot of friends. They're very impulsive with their behaviors. They have this restless, aggressive energy. Anything can set them off. They're very egocentric. They think they are the end-all, be-all. These are the kids when you ask them, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you rate yourself? I'm a 10. Everybody loves me. Now, some kids will say that they're a 10, even though they have low self-esteem. And you don't score that out. But some kids really feel that they are a 10. They have a taste for risk. They like engaging in risky behaviors. They have below average verbal intellect, very weak problem-solving skills, poor self-regulation skills. They also have that lack of empathy for other people. They don't get it. They don't feel for other people. So they don't understand how their decisions have an impact on others. And when you can't get that from a kid, then you have one that's, I don't care. They won't engage, or they'll go through the motions just to get off probation and get you out of their business. But you're likely to see them again because they're engaging in that impulsive behavior. When I think of antisocial personality disorder, I always think of Dexter, sociopath. We have this, I teach criminal justice classes, and we always have this conversation when we talk about sociopaths and such. You know, is a serial killer who kills serial killers really a bad thing? You know, vigilantism, I guess, is bad. But in regards to the antisocial behavior, you're looking at the history. And again, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. You know, it's evident from a very young age. You don't want to, you're looking for these things that, okay, they like to start fires. Yeah, I used to tie up my cat and, you know, set it on fire. You're looking for those really out of the norm behaviors. It's been observed across a number of settings. It's not isolated to one event. Yeah, when I was 10, I set a fire. Okay, well, when I was 5, 7, 10, I set fires. And it involves a variety of antisocial acts. So it's not just I set a fire, it's also, you know, oh, I tortured my cat, or I like to rip the heads off my sister's dolls. And, you know, it's a pattern of behavior that you're looking for. Family. Family can provide the same influences as friends depending on the environment. Can anybody give me an example of how this could be true? Okay, substance abuse. How? Okay, they could be modeling bad behavior. What were you going to say? Okay.
I've run into issues with gangs, where it's just
Yep.
kind of passed down, and mother and father are both.
Yep, and then the kid's been entrenched, and that's the family. That's the way of life. Yep, you've got that ongoing. So again, modeling that antisocial behavior. So even though you have negative friends, if you have a negative family, it can be the same thing. They shape their attitudes and values and beliefs. They're the first socializing, you know, entity that a child comes into. They're socialized from the very beginning through their family. And so if they start out wrong, it's very hard to correct bad behaviors. They reward behavior, they reward bad behavior, they punish good behavior, which seems in our minds completely ridiculous. The family can support either a criminal or a pro-social behavior depending on the content of interactions. There are some classes of people where pro-social behaviors are not acceptable. Thinking of going on to higher education is not a priority. They don't want their children to do better. They want to keep them in the same situation they are already in. These are the families that are going to be incredibly difficult to work with, as well as the juvenile, because they don't acknowledge that there was any wrongdoing, or that, no, what's the big deal if he doesn't go to school? I didn't go to school, so who cares? Or don't tell my son what to do. You're not his parent. So not only can it be difficult working with the juvenile, it can be incredibly difficult to work with a family that doesn't want to work with you. Okay, education and employment. Employment or education occupies time with a pro-social activity, receiving rewards for participation in a pro-social activity, and interacting with pro-social others. These are all, you know, things to counteract risk factors. Substance abuse. The activity is illegal in itself. Some kids will say, well, I'm only smoking pot. What's the big deal? Well, A, it's illegal. B, you can't do it because you're on probation. But you always come back to the argument where it's illegal because they totally justify that it's not a bad deal. It's not a hard drug. It's not that big a deal. It's like smoking cigarettes. It should be legal anyway. I always hear that all the time. Use may lead to other criminal behaviors. How many kids are high or drunk when they commit crime? Well, you lower those inhibitions, it's a lot easier to engage in negative behavior. Buying drugs puts a person in contact with criminal behaviors. Just because you're not using doesn't mean that you don't have contact with negative behavior or with negative individuals. Even if you're selling drugs, because you're not using them doesn't make it any better. So buying drugs usually creates an environment that is conducive to criminal behavior. I had one boy that tested clean over and over and over again, but I found out he was selling drugs. He just didn't use his own products. He got detained pretty quickly. First one, some of the kids that are my acquaintances use drugs, but none of them have been arrested or on probation. Is this a risk factor? Yes. You want more information?
How much contact someone needs.
Okay. All right, but it could need more information. You're right. I've been adjudicated on a drug charge. Risk factor? Yeah. None of my acquaintances have ever been in trouble. They all go to school and stay away from drugs and alcohol. No. My boyfriend sells drugs. Is that a risk factor? A few of my friends have been in trouble before. Is that a risk factor? That one you'd need more information on. How close are they? How many? None of the people I consider friends have been in trouble. They don't use drugs or get arrested. No. All right. Okay, real quick, let's just do this one together. So, first one, the youth reported he goes to church on the weekends as part of the football team and wrestles in the winter. Is this a risk factor? Hang out, play video games, and watch TV. Huh? Yes? No?
That's all he does, yes.
Okay.
More information.
See, this one is where we always get into a debate in the YLS training because, well, he's watching TV and he's playing games. He's not out on the streets getting in trouble. But does that necessarily, and we always come back, because I will sometimes argue this, but it always comes back to what does society identify as pro-social? Sitting at home in your basement playing video games. No, they're not getting in trouble, but is that really pro-social? Are they interacting with others besides the headset that's in their ear? In our society, though, right now, social networking and online gaming are big components of our youth's lives. And yeah, that's how they interact with a lot of people, but in society, that's still not, looked at as being engaged.
I would say if they're doing this stuff with a bunch of friends,
that's social, right? So if they're all sitting around, though, playing Xbox together, they're at least engaging with one another. But if you're sitting in your basement and playing video games and that's all you do, then it's probably a risk factor. A couple of years ago, I played football, basketball, and lacrosse for the school's team, but I don't do it anymore. Is that a risk factor? Yeah. I usually come home after school and watch TV until I go to bed. On the weekends, I hang out at the mall. Is that a risk factor? Yeah, it's not a whole lot of construction or constructive time. I do my homework after school, have dinner, and then watch TV. On the weekends, I work on Saturday and then go out on Saturday night. Is that a risk factor? No. I don't like to do anything but hang out and smoke dope. I hope so. I like to play video games and watch TV. Maybe we've already talked about that one. I need more information. And then I like to read, play sports, and spend time with my grandparents. No. All right. So a review of the risk principle. Certain factors are tied to criminal behavior. You need to understand the link between the factors and criminal behavior, which helps us better understand the second aspect of the risk principle. And you always want to match supervision with treatment at the appropriate level of risk. Because you don't want to over-supervise, you don't want to under-supervise, you don't want to recommend the wrong treatment levels. Low-risk offenders recidivate at higher rates when placed in residential interventions and/or intensive supervision. Statistics shows us that. High-risk offenders respond better when placed in a residential intervention or an intensive supervision because they need that increased level of supervision. They need that extra structure. You know, if you have a kid who's at a party and accidentally got an MIP, okay, do we need to place them in a treatment group home? No, because then they're going to be exposed to a lot of bad influences and a lot of information about substances. Should they go to a general education class about drugs and alcohol? Well, probably, but that doesn't mean they need treatment. So again, the risk is the who, the need is the what. By assessing and targeting offenders' criminogenic needs, we can reduce the likelihood of recidivism. We're targeting in on what they need help with. Interventions must be very focused and target the needs that are related to the risk. So you're taking the risk and the need and you're making them relate to one another. Dynamic risk factors. You have your antisocial attitudes, antisocial peers, antisocial personalities, the family, the education, employment, and the substance abuse. All right. We're going to identify criminogenic or non-criminogenic needs. So, vague or emotional. Let me find my cheat sheet. Where's my cheat sheet? Vague, emotional, or personal problems. Is that a criminogenic or a non-criminogenic need? I'm backtracking here. Vague, emotional, or personal problems. Yes. What about physical activity? Physical activity. That wouldn't be considered a non-criminogenic just because they don't run for the track team. You can't really identify it as being a criminogenic. Maybe they're a couch potato, but it doesn't matter that much in regards to criminogenic thinking. How about antisocial attitudes? Absolutely. Fear of official punishment. Is that criminogenic or non-criminogenic? Huh? Fear of punishment. No, that's a non-criminogenic need. Increasing cohesiveness with antisocial peers. Is that a criminogenic? Yes, absolutely. Family. Is that a criminogenic risk? Yes. Substance abuse. Self-esteem? No, it's not. And again, these are those YLS domains that we're looking at. Increasing conventional ambition? No. Education, employment? Yes. So you have your antisocial attitudes, your family, your antisocial peers, your substance abuse, your education, employment. Those are all your criminogenic risks. Those are what you're targeting. You know, if somebody has poor self-esteem, you can help them through counseling, but you can't identify that as being a risk. Again, they're lazy, they just don't want to go out and play sports. You can't identify that as a risk per se. Do they fear getting in trouble? No, but that doesn't mean that there's a high risk to recidivate. It just means that they don't have any fear of getting in trouble. All right? So those are the criminogenic and non-criminogenic risk factors. So we're going to target criminogenic needs. We're looking at the family. We're going to maybe recommend vocational skills. We're looking at those anger, antisocial feelings. Maybe we're recommending an anger management class. We're going to help them self-control. If they're very impulsive, well, what can we do to help you stop, think before you act? Maybe they need some help in that area. We're going to do some pro-social modeling. Or we're going to try to hook them up in an environment where there is that pro-social modeling. Like maybe they need a mentor, or maybe they should join Boys and Girls Club. And then you want to address those antisocial attitudes. You want to change that into more pro-social thinking. Some of the things that we can do then is the substance abuse treatment. We can reduce that antisocial peer contact. And we can also develop a relapse prevention plan. That doesn't necessarily mean it's treatment, but it could be related to any of the YLS domains. Relapse could be, okay, you know, we've got you hanging out with some good friends now, well, what can we do to avoid relapsing back into that old group of friends? So it's just planning for what can we do if X, Y, and Z happens. But we don't ever want to anticipate or tell them we anticipate it will happen. You want to look at vague emotional or personal problems. You know, their physical activity, lack of physical activity. You know, you always feel a little bit better about yourself if you're up and active. Do they have that fear of punishment? Increasing cohesiveness of antisocial peers. You want to build those bonds so that they can be more engaged. They'll start feeling better about themselves. Maybe they'll want to get out and get active. These positive attitudes will have an impact on those criminogenic needs. So we're going to target their self-esteem, we're going to increase conventional ambition, and we're going to respect antisocial thinking, I guess, so, right? That component basically is, you know, they have a mindset. We can, I don't want to say understand, or we can respect the way that they think, but we can show them how to change their way of thinking. Can't force them, but we can do that.
It really comes up with marijuana.
It should be legal. We tend to do that, addressing that criminogenic mindset through cognitive behavioral groups. We do the MRT, it's moral reformation therapy. Basically, you know, how a COG group goes is that you change their thinking in order to change their behavior. So that's how we kind of address this antisocial social thinking. We want them to make long-term changes, and the only way you can do that is by changing the way somebody sees the world. So, in regards to responsivity, you have that neglected principle. It's the barriers to successful treatment. Offenders respond differently to treatment strategies. You know, you have to figure out which one works for each offender. Offenders adjust differently to correctional environments, so you have to give them time to adjust. And again, it's easier to think of these as barriers to treatment. Assessment of responsivity is important in order to maximize the benefits of treatment. So you need to identify the barriers in order to help create success. When you're dealing with those barriers, you're looking at external factors. You know, maybe they're with a counselor who doesn't get them, that they don't jive. The setting in which they are living in. Are they in a group home? Are they out in the community? Well, what are they doing out in the community? What type of treatment are they engaged in? Are they in IOP and mom can't get off of work to take her child to intensive outpatient treatment 3 times a week? And do they have a support network? Well, maybe if mom can't do it, can grandma? Or is there a mentor involved in this youth's life? So you got to work with what you have. You also have internal factors that come into play. You know, maybe they don't have any desire to change. It's very hard to get somebody to change their thoughts and their behaviors when they don't want to. They lack motivation. Maybe there's some personality characteristics. Maybe they have anxiety, psychopathy, that low self-esteem. Maybe medication needs to be applied before you can get any farther with treatment options. You know, maybe there are cognitive deficiencies. They don't understand what's going on. Maybe their IQ is below 70. It's very hard to work with clients with lower functioning. Demographics, what is their age, their race, their sex, their ethnicity? Maybe English isn't their second language and they get in trouble in school to divert the fact that they don't understand. So these are things that we need to work with. We need to figure these out. And then the professional discretion, also known as that override. You need to consider the risk, need, and the responsivity. We determine if placements are dictated by assessment, and if they are they the most appropriate? You know, gosh, I really feel that Johnny doesn't really need IOP, but, you know, we've got to go to a therapist for that final say. Well, maybe the therapist comes back and says, you know what, really, you know, we reassessed and they don't need IOP. You know, it's that gut feeling. With general caseloads, overrides should only occur about 10% of the time because we need to rely on the validity of the assessment. Override rates will increase if you have a specialized caseload. Sex offenders tend to score out very low on the NYS. We typically don't have any problems with them. They do well in school. There are no behavior problems. they are involved in activities. Their only offense is they are a sex offender, that they perpetrated on either another child or another youth around their age. You want to also consider the other risk assessments that you use as well. And we'll talk about those. Kim and I will talk about the other risk assessments that we use. Okay, and then finally, this is how it's kind of broken down. We look at the YLS in regards to scoring. When it's all said and done, I know it's a very long process. 0 to 8 we usually identify as low risk. The moderate risk, 9 to 22. In probation, we break it down. It's 9 to 16. It's that low, moderate, or moderate high risk. 23 to 34 is considered high risk, and your very high is 35 to 42. Typically, these are the kids that are not appropriate for any type of community supervision. These are the kids that might need to go to a YRTC. Like I said, the example that we had in our office where it was a deport, it's just a status offender, came in and he automatically scored out at a 28 on the YLS. So he was very high. Not very high, but almost to that point where, we ended up recommending community supervision for this juvenile just because he's never been on anything. He already had in-home services put into place. There were already things in motion. So by the time we got to him and he came to us, we didn't have any issue with putting him on probation. Now, we gave him a laundry list of items that he has to complete, so hopefully we won't have any problems. But even when you have a high YLS score, you can still try to work with them in the community because that is the goal. You don't want to have to incarcerate or pull anybody out of the home unless it's really deemed necessary because it has a huge impact on a juvenile.